Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What are some of your most memorable cases? Story 1 had a husband and wife go toe-to-toe over an ashtray they got in Vegas. At some point neither smoked, strangely enough. Spent nearly $5,000 for me and another attorney to duke it out in court over the silly thing. Prior to proceeding, I explained what the cost would be to argue over something silly like this, and that he could give me $2,500 and I would fly to Vegas for the weekend and get him an identical one instead. He said he didn't care about the costs because he intended to smash it on the courthouse steps in front of her if we won. We won, and he followed through with the smashing. He laughed and said the look on her face was worth much more than $2,500. People get crazy in divorce proceedings. Story 2 Not a lawyer, but as a courthouse clerk, I had a court order come across my desk that explicitly banned a father from playing Minecraft with his son over the internet because the ex-wife alleged that the in-game chat was a form of improper contact that wasn't outlined in their custody visitation plan. Story 3 I'm a tax lawyer, not a divorce one, but this case from my native RI has always been a favorite of mine for the legal argument and an example of what ex-spouses can do. Johnson v. Johnson, which was heard before the Supreme Court of RI. A man calls his wife in a crowded restaurant. She sues him for slander. The court agrees with him that she's a edit. Since you all like this one, Stambovsky v. Ackley is the case that says as a matter of law, the house is haunted. Story 4 I wouldn't recommend it, but one of the best ways to stick it to your ex and to skip most of fallout is to die during the legal battle. In this case, the couple orally was declared divorced, but before the official paperwork is finalized the husband dies. So what does the court do? Well, it takes the courts 2 years to sort out how this should be handled, and then the court says that the divorce proceedings must continue with somebody to represent the husband's interests, so now the wife has to divide everything $5,050 with a dead man. If he had died 2 weeks sooner she would have avoided years of court hearings, thousands in legal fees, and kept everything for herself. Story 5 My aunt has been divorced for quite some time. She drives her attorney crazy with her request demands. Most recently she took her husband to court over 1 he switched the beneficiary of his life insurance policy from her the ex-wife to their children. 2 she wants court-ordered drug tests weekly. She found out from her friend who works at a pharmacy that he has had quite a few narcotic prescriptions, but obviously can't enter that into evidence, or friend will be fired. 3 wants to know the days he's working and locations, so she can have her private investigator keep an eye out and make sure the new girlfriend isn't joining him at hotels he's charging on his work card. At some point, she just needs to let it go and move on. She got the house and the house payments, the kids, the boat, and the Marriott points. He doesn't pay alimony or child support, so it seems like it worked out well. Story 6 My time to shine. NSFW story coming up. So my dad's a divorce lawyer and doesn't usually talk about his work, but he did tell me one story. He had a client who was a trucker and wanted to divorce his wife. My dad describes this guy as the embodiment of a late 40s, 300 pounds, gentle sir, neckbeard, red pill kinda guy. The man tells my dad a narrative about how he and his wife are in an open marriage, but she refuses to have another partner. Even though this man has multiple partners, he also casually mentions to my dad that he is but wanted to make it very clear that he prefers women, but has with men regularly. It's worth noting that my dad is as straight-edge old-fashioned as they come. Imagine Hank Hill but from Georgia. So the guy tells my dad that he wants to divorce his wife. He doesn't say why at first. Dad asks him why, and he tells him a story about his last trucking or whatever it's called. This guy was out in his truck on a run, and it's his 49th birthday. Since he was alone at a truck stop on his birthday, his wife gets her husband a prostitute. Now remember how I said this guy is bi? She gets him a gigolo, so this man and this male hooker are getting it on in his big rig. The guy tells my dad in graphic detail that the male hooker bit his while he was getting and that it hurt so much he punched the prostitute, kicked him out of the truck, and immediately called his wife saying he wanted a divorce for hiring a prostitute that would do such a thing. My dad said he's never had to try harder to keep a straight face and be professional, but the guy ended up being a great client. Great client to my dad means he actually paid. Dad says a lot of divorce clients lose the divorce and end up not paying the lawyer. TLDR 300 pounds neckbeard wants a divorce because his wife hired him a male hooker that bit his. My Hank Hill-esque dad tried not to laugh at him. Edit Thank you all for letting me know the difference between a red pill and a gentle sir. I didn't know there was one. Gonna leave it there and wear my shame. Story 7 I once represented a client from a divorcing couple who still lived together pending the sale of the family home, but would not speak to one another for any reason whatsoever. Had to negotiate terms with opposing counsel for the sharing of refrigerator space. Story 8 My brother is a divorce attorney. His most memorable case, he was representing a guy in a divorce custody battle who was accused of horrific child abuse. Very graphic, very detailed depositions from the young kids against daddy. Things look grim. Then my brother, a failed actor, notices the deposition transcript done by social workers under oath contains a question at the end from one of the kids: did I hit my marks? He wonders how little kids know about acting jargon. Subpoenas wife's personal checking ACCT during discovery. Sure enough, acting lessons. Deposes an extremely sketchy acting coach, and panicked coach produces DVDs of practice interrogations with the kids. Hours of coaching the kids on exactly what imaginary things to say about daddy. He says it was his one and only Perry Mason moment in 20 years of practice, and dad got sole custody of the kids. Story 9 My mom works in divorce court. She comes home with stories that are interesting, sad, funny, and sometimes just weird, what you would expect for the most part. Then there are the drug addicts that don't want to give up custody. The day of the drug test comes and the person miraculously decided to shave their entire body tests are now given right after the judge asks for one. And some are hilarious when you're not the one involved. My favorite is a voicemail is played in court as evidence. The wife is cheating on the guy. This voicemail is from the husband to the wife. Hey, I know you are there. The only reason you can't answer is because I know you can't speak with that guy's in your mouth. Sometimes my mom has those stories which are funny if you are not involved. Story 10. One of my all-time favorites is the marriage of Thomas and Denise Rossi. I am not connected to the case, but it was a notorious case that resulted in a published California Court of Appeal opinion, which means that all the details are public record. Denise Rossi won $1.3 million as part of a group of co-workers who joined a lottery pool together. 11 days later she filed for divorce and moved out. She never mentioned the winning lottery ticket to Thomas. She also did not disclose the proceeds as either her separate property or as community property during the divorce. And she would have gotten away with it too, if it hadn't been for the letter that was sent to the marital residence over 2 years after the divorce had been finalized. The letter was an offer to buy out Denise's lottery annuity with a lump sum payment. Thomas promptly lawyered up and the family court awarded 100 of the prize proceeds to Thomas. For the legally curious, please understand that California is a community property state, which means among other things that all earnings during marriage are community property that is owned equally by both spouses. Anything obtained using community property funds like a lottery ticket is also community property. There are also heavy penalties for violating the disclosure requirements that come along with a divorce in California family law matters. You must disclose all of your assets to the other side, even if there is no question that some of the assets are your separate property. In any case where a party to a divorce fraudulently conceals a community property asset as with the Rossis, it is mandatory under Family Code Section 1100 for the court to award 100 of the asset to the other party, and other penalties can also be applied. For the legally nerdy, the case citation is 90 calories, App. 434. Story 11. The Beanie Baby divorce has to be up there. Edit context. November 5, 1999, Las Vegas, Nevada. USA attorney Frank Totti looks over papers while his client Frances Mountain sorts out Beanie Babies with her ex-husband Harold Mountain in Judge Gerald Hardcastle's family courtroom in Las Vegas. November 5. The couple, who were divorced 4 months ago, were ordered to divide up the collection valued at $2,500 to $5,000, but were unable to do so by themselves. The collection was ordered spread on the court floor and divided up one by one under the supervision of family court Judge Hardcastle. Maple the Bear was the first to go. Cost of Maple Bear today on Amazon, com $7.90. Story 12. Worked for a family law lawyer in Santa Cruz. One of her frequent opponents, a decent, if aggressive lawyer, just down the street, got a package bomb wrapped like a Christmas present. He picked it up, and it blew up in his face, blew off most of his fingers, and left shrapnel in his face and chest. Last I heard, he dropped out of the legal profession. Happened on Christmas Eve in 1996. Story 13. My first trial. My client was being sued for a divorce on grounds of habitual cruel and inhuman treatment. Her husband alleged that she grabbed his really hard and hurt it. He alleged it was on purpose. I had to cross-examine him about it. Story 14. I had a case where the husband found some incriminating texts on his wife's phone that she was cheating on him with some guy, and also gets the impression his sister-in-law might be in on it in some way. Him and his brother end up hiring a PI to tail them both to get the truth. They essentially confirm that both women are seeing other people. The sister-in-law admitted full guilt of sleeping with another man and they attempted to reconcile, but his brother eventually filed for divorce. The one wife admitted she was looking to sleep with the guy, but they only met for some kisses and she touched his penis a little bit in hoping that would prove that she was still faithful since she couldn't go through with it. He filed for divorce anyway. Also, a serious tag helps these kinds of threads. Story 15. I'm a real estate lawyer, but a friend of a friend is a divorce lawyer. I was once told a story where said lawyer was brutally attacked by a client's former spouse. Apparently the former spouse blamed the divorce attorney for taking him to the cleaners in the divorce. The worst part is that the lawyer was at the grocery store doing his weekly food shopping with his wife and kids when he was savagely beaten. Criminal lawyers work with the worst people on their best behavior. Family lawyers work with the best people on their worst behavior. Edit. Thank you kind stranger for my first Reddit gold. You the real MVP. Story 16. My grandfather went through a pretty high-stakes divorce about 10 years ago. He founded a consulting firm in 1994 that ended up being worth several $1 million. He was married to his second wife, not my grandmother, who was his first wife whom he divorced in the 80s when he founded it. She was an executive for a large health and beauty product company. They were both very successful. When they divorced, they had been living in a very large house in an exclusive neighborhood in an affluent southern suburb. She got the house, and kept her wealth that she had amassed from her company, but that wasn't it. She also wanted 51 of my grandfather's company. She didn't win that in court because she had already won more than half of the assets. I doubt my grandfather really gave about that, but I could be wrong. He just wanted to keep his company which already made him plenty of money. Things got interesting after they separated. She allegedly hired a private investigator to stalk my grandfather. Yes, stalk. We found a tracking device attached to his car. No bullshit. He moved into an apartment for a while during the divorce proceedings. She and her lawyer eventually went to his apartment to take pictures of everything he owned. He obviously let them into his apartment. They even opened up his fridge and took pictures of the inside of his fridge. My grandfather eventually started dating somebody else. Yes, at around age 60 he likes women, and the ex-wife would call my grandfather's house and talk to her, trying to appear friendly, or something. It was just a very strange situation. It was even stranger for me. I had grown up with her sort of as my grandmother. I never knew she wasn't my actual grandmother until I met my dad's actual mom at age 7. I didn't meet my father until age 6. Mind you, it was kind of confusing until the divorce. But during and after the divorce, my grandfather's ex would call my mother to ask to take me out to dinner, and movies, and things like that. I remember seeing Star Wars Episode 3 in theaters with her. I didn't find it strange, or anything. She had known me since I was born and served as a grandmotherly figure. However, my father hated her. I heard a lot of stories of the crazy she did to him when my dad was a teenager. I haven't talked to her for several years. I much prefer my actual grandmother. Divorce is strange, seeing how easily it can tear families apart, and over individuals. I'm definitely doing a prenup when if I get married, you never know. Story 17 represented the husband. Tried to get court to eliminate his spousal support obligations. Wife insisted she needed the support. It took way longer than it should have because she was regularly taking vacations to Mexico, regularly at least once a month. It took longer than it should have because we had to reschedule a few times, but the court eventually ended the spousal support. Contrary to what the silly people at TRP would have you believe, family law is not designed forward a radical feminist agenda. Story 18. A friend who is a lawyer told me a pretty crazy story about a wealthy couple splitting up. The woman hid millions of dollars overseas and cut up all her husband's clothing with a pair of scissors. These shenanigans caused her to get almost nothing. Story 19. I worked for a law firm while in college, and we had a client who had just come home from a 2-week vacation with his wife, only to be served with divorce papers and a temporary restraining order as soon as they pulled in the driveway. Wife didn't say a word and just went into their house. Poor guy came straight to our office and was massively confused, to say the least. Story 20. My father did divorce law for many years. We were in Virginia Beach for a tournament I was in with a friend of mine and his father. This is back around 07. My dad got a call from a forensic accountant he hired to track down some accounts his client knew her husband stashed money in. He was asked to pull over and to put him on speaker because he would not believe what he was about to tell him. The accountant traced all of his money to 3 bank accounts totaling over $300 million in another country. My friend's father screamed. My father dropped his phone and there were numerous WTF from the back seat. My father's client made out with 2 of the 3 accounts and they walked away silently. He was paid in full, given a small bonus, and has never heard from her again. Story 21. I'm a divorce lawyer. Most of these comments are pretty negative and none of them are actually stories. I'd love to share some, but it's against our professional rules of ethics to describe anything specific enough that someone reading it would recognize him or herself in it. That being said, I've seen people fight over calculators, underwear, llamas, who burned down the barn, and other ridiculously petty things, to more serious cases of domestic violence and child abuse. Yes, divorce lawyers can be emotionally distant. This is a coping mechanism, and a necessary one at that. Yes, divorce lawyers are expensive, but they are a privilege which can save you from getting totally screwed subject to the law of your state and the humor of your judge. I feel like my fees are fair, considering I have a doctorate in law, and am using my time and experience to give my clients advice and steer them through the process while protecting their rights, fighting for a favorable outcome, saving them from being at every court date, and all of this while adhering to state, county, and court rules and case law. I always give my clients a choice when I think what they are fighting for is not worth it for what they will pay in fees. Also, I think one challenge for us is most non-lawyers don't realize how counterintuitive the system is and how evidence doesn't just come in automatically. It can be a tough battle and you have to make lots of sacrifices along the way, but as I remind them, no one really wins when you are splitting everything you have in half. Spacing edit. Okay, actually a lot more of these are stories now, and really good ones. Story 22. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but when I was at a mediation a few months ago, the mediator was telling me about a divorce he mediated a few years back. It was your classic rich guy is sick of his wife and kids, and wants a divorce to run off with a young, hot piece of, his wife wanted blood. She came to the mediation with some pretty outrageous demands about the money and property she'd receive. The mediator pushed hard throughout a long day of mediation, but she hadn't budged an inch. Finally, very late in the day, the husband threw up his hands and said, "I'd give her everything she's asking for, and let's be done with it." The mediator went back to the wife's conference room to share the good news that the husband had caved in, and she flipped out, glowing incandescent with rage at the idea that her husband was willing to pay truly insane compensation to be done with her and ride off with his little girlfriend. The husband's statement of property listed all the food in the kitchen as of the date of separation, complete with estimated values for each item. Campbell's vegetable soup $0.79. Story 23. Not a divorce lawyer but a child of divorce. Happened when I was about 6 or 7, I'm 18 now. I learned this about a year ago. My mother often likes to talk about how my father didn't offer any financial assistance during the divorce and his involvement was purely selfish, and a common thing she's told me is that he's never paid for my schooling, which is true post-divorce. However, what I learnt was that during the divorce he offered to pay for half of all of my school fees. She instead chose child support, which he has paid for every year. She also took all of their combined savings out and into my 6 years old at the time bank account, which my father had no access to. This meant when showing bank statements, my father had more money than my mother. I've lost some respect for her since then. Story 24 had a client whose soon-to-be ex-husband used her email address and phone number to sign her up for every bank, loan, religious, mental illness, and pornographic site he could think of. She was bombarded by people contacting her about her interest in their product services. He even put out ads for partners on Craigslist with her information. The kicker is that she actually went out with a guy who contacted her. If I learned anything being a divorce attorney I no longer practice, it was that if the opposing party sounded like a nutcase, I would soon see the nutcase come out of my own client. Normal people don't just accidentally marry crazies, not often. Story 25 Back when I was in law school I was a clerk for a judge that heard a lot of divorce cases. The craziest one involved a gambling addict. The guy would write ridiculous checks to the local casino, $20K, $30K, even $100K all the time. The wife admitted to going with him to the casino each time, but said she only played the penny slots and had no idea he was spending that much money. Because they were splitting the remaining assets that were still substantial, she wanted the money he spent at the casino to count against him so she would get a whole lot more. While there were copies of the checks, it was his word against hers as to whether she knew about them and whether she was also playing the high-stakes games. The husband said she knew and she played the high-stakes games too. I remember the oral hearing was the last week that I worked there, so I never heard how it turned out. I do, however, remember the judge thinking they were both lying, which all good judges always believe. Story 26 Divorce lawyer here. I've never had anything too crazy. The worst I can think of is representing my client who had to be transported from the jail for allegedly violating the restraining order between the two. There was another one that was technically a dissolution of domestic partnership, not a divorce, but essentially the same thing for never married parties that was fairly crazy. Client alleged her ex had killed a man and reported it to the police, but I guess they never found the body. Also alleged his attorney was sleeping with him. One of my coworkers had a case where the ex was awarded the couple's dog in the divorce only to have it euthanized just so the other would suffer more. I don't care how bad your relationship is, there is no excuse for that. That pissed me off to hear about. Story 27 I work for a mortgage company, and occasionally we have to review divorce decrees if someone is divorcing to remove a spouse's name from the loan. There is a notorious case known around my pretty large department as the cat divorce decree account. In this divorce decree, there is a 5-page addendum specifically regarding Mittens and Buttons Johnson names changed for their protection. Memorable clauses included mandatory 10-minute Skype sessions weekly, no unsupervised playdates with children under 15, and that their claws be trimmed every 3 days. Story 28 I'm not a lawyer but was in a painful divorce. I had my ex stand up before the judge and say also, there is this item on his credit card from Strip Joint and I had to look it up and I think it's a strip club. Since we were representing ourselves, I got the judge's attention and he let me speak. My response, Your Honor, she knows what the item is about because she was there that night and even got it from another lady. There were a few chuckles from the peanut gallery and the judge had this quiet hidden little grin that vanished quickly. It felt awesome to say because I'd been over so much from the divorce, it was shitty. My grandpa was a family law attorney in Los Angeles in the 70s who had a pretty memorable case. He was representing the wife during the divorce. One day, during some court hearing in front of a judge, they went on a recess. In front of the courthouse during the recess, the ex-husband pulled a gun on my grandpa. My grandpa ducked and dodged around a tree for a bit but was still shot 3 times in the stomach. He spent a few months in the hospital and pulled through. He claimed to be the reason that metal detectors were installed in courthouses. My grandpa was shot June 11, 1973, and to my knowledge there's no footage of this happening. I found a newspaper clipping from the news report on Google News, however. Pretty sure I just subliminally combined the video with what actually happened. Story 29 Hey Race, a not divorced one. But it's pretty good. Husband and wife are from a culture where you simply do not divorce. They have a few kids. He moves on and dates a woman for nearly 20 years. And they also have a kid together. He does a will and tells no one how it is set up other than there is a trust. The guy dies. He made a trust for his entire estate. He designated that his kids would each be beneficiaries with equal % interest, but also gave his girlfriend one more than his wife. She was also named as executor of the estate and trustee for the trust. Popcorn was had. Story 30 not divorce related but still interesting. When a local couple died, they will indicated that their house and sizable fortune would remain in trust, managed by family friends, until their several cats died of natural causes. The odd thing is, it's been over 20 years now, and the cats are still alive. Also, they've changed color. Story 31 I had a client that was being sued by her baby's daddy for custody and child support. He had a weapons charge and drug charge on his recent record. My client, the mother, was clean. During cross-examination I asked about those charges and asked if he was subjected to a test. Would he pass? He answered in the affirmative. The judge, upon request from counsel me, had the sheriff's office administer a test for both. He, the father, failed. My client, the mother, passed. Judge awarded my client custody and child support. It isn't that interesting, but what makes it funny is this was my first family law case. An opposing counsel was a very well-known and tough family law attorney. Prior to our hearing, opposing counsel came in and she literally demanded we agree to her client's terms or else my client would never see the kid again. I offered that her client, the father, get weekends, etc., standard visitation schedule. She declined and her client failed the drug test administered after the hearing. My client passed. That's pretty minor, but it was a pretty cool win for a young attorney up against a big name. She also left me a voicemail congratulating me for kicking her at the hearing, and called me a humble son of a for presenting our offer considering our knowledge of the drug and weapons charge. All for naught since the clients ended up back together a year and a half later. Imagine that. Edit. I think a lot of confusion comes from the fact a woman attorney was representing a father suing the mother for custody and support. I'm guessing everyone confused had their mind bent by the gender designations. Come on people, it's 2015. Story 32. Husband and wife still living together at the time had a small confrontation. The husband pulls a sphincter, says what on her, and she takes the bait and says what. He giggled like a little kid. She then told her lawyer, who had to talk to his lawyer. His lawyer asked him if he called his wife a sphincter, and told him he's not allowed to call her that anymore. Story 33. Handled exactly one divorce case in my younger days. We represented the wife. Husband had been caught with a shed full of child. We were more than happy to help her divorce the sick. Story 34. 20-year divorce lawyer here. I've seen it all. I once represented a husband divorcing his wife of 35 years. They were in their late 60s. At mediation they divided up about $500,000 in assets within 30 minutes. Then they spent 5 hours fighting over 2 hurricane glasses from Pat O'Brien's and a pitchfork. Mediator, she really wants that pitchfork. It was a gift from her daddy. Husband, that. We bought it at Home Depot 2 years ago. And etc. They settled at mediation after spending over $1,000 in attorney fees combined for the glasses and pitchfork. They remarried 3 months later. Divorcee, not a lawyer, but I remember the blank stare from the lawyer. I was paying $250 an hour to handle my case with my husband, when I told him our biggest marital asset was our 10,000 Magic the Gathering card collection. Story 35. The child, a 10-year-old girl, of my father client thanked me after the custody battle against the out-of-control alcoholic mother. The court awarded full physical and legal custody to the father. The child said to me that I was a lawyer for kids. I never forgot the compliment. That was 30 years ago. Story 36. I filed for divorce from my wife of 10 years well over 2 years ago because she got pregnant from an affair she had with her boss, and tried to sneak that new child into my family as a child of my own. I knew it wasn't mine, and proved it with a prenatal paternity test. Went to mediation. The house is completely in my name, and she was supposed to move out in July of 2013. Problem was, she just refused to move out. Back to court, cost her $3,000 in court costs, and she finally moved out 2 months later. That lasted for 3 months. Because she was kicked out of the $1,300 a month 1-bedroom apartment she rented for non-payment. Read, she rented an apartment she couldn't even afford, in which the daughter we have together didn't even get her own room. Anyway, my wife, her illegitimate son, and our daughter showed up on my doorstep late one night with nowhere else to go, and she asked to stay for a month or 2 while she found another place. Whatever, I said okay, because I wasn't going to allow my daughter to just live in a car with her. That stayed for another year and a half before I finally finalized my divorce last week. During that time she was here, however, she hit my daughter in the face. I called the cops on her, got her arrested, and made tape recordings of her saying she'd do it again in a heartbeat if my daughter ever disrespected her. I immediately told my lawyer I wanted to remediate for primary custody of my daughter, and $400 a month in child support, which was the other way around initially, which I not only got, but I also was awarded, having my daughter 75 of the year, when it was only 46 previously. Now my wife must begin paying me that child support beginning July 1st, and absolutely must vacate my house by July 12th with all her possessions. She hasn't seemed to be actively seeking a new residence, so I have already arranged for the sheriff to be at my house on July 13th, and have hired some movers to come and remove all those possessions on the 13th. If she has no destination picked out for them, I've told them they can keep anything and everything they want. Her, and am finally going to be free of the monster that she is. TLDR, if you're getting divorced, don't ever let your ex-to-be step 1 foot in your house. You may have a tough time getting her to leave, but my lawyer and I roasted her in court, and things definitely didn't go the way she wanted them to. Yay me, and now she can go live under a bridge for all I care. Edited for clarity. Edit 2. This is a quote from a book that I read, not a marriage book. It was just a Greg Iles thriller while all this was going on that I used as my closing statement to the judge before all this was accepted and finalized, that I found to be completely apropos for my situation. The only life after death any human being will ever know is staying in a marriage or a partnership after it's over. And that's not life, it's living death. I think he liked it. After college I worked in a law firm dealing with family law and have a ton of stories. At one time we had almost a dozen cases of high military personnel going through divorces because their wives came out of the closet after all their children grew up. 2. We had a client who was wealthy, but going through a divorce cause she was going crazy. She dressed like a homeless person, smelled like, and once I delivered a copy of her husband's Discover to her and her house looked like a dump, I literally thought she was going to kill me and bury me under the piles and piles of in her place. She also kept harassing her husband and his girlfriend, vandalizing the car, writing on the door of the condo, etc. We had to drop her as a client after she kept disobeying her attorney, etc. 3. We had a wealthy client who married a girl he met during tango classes and they had a child. He spent over $500,000 fighting for custody and she kept accusing him of abusing their daughter, to try and win, etc. Each side hired psychologists and experts and in the end, It didn't matter if it wasn't the truth. The mother kept telling the girl she was abused and the expert said it was going to damage her regardless. He eventually won partial custody. After 2 years of working there, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer and I don't want to get married, haha. Story 37. Not a divorce lawyer, but I'm a CPS investigator and a lot of my cases are spite case called in by a spiteful ex that thinks CPS is the cheap way to obtain custody. Don't do this. Just get a lawyer and stop wasting my time. Story 38. Well, this will get buried, but oh well, not me, but my pops is an attorney, so he is doing this case back in the early 90s. He is representing the wife and the case has been ugly. Both sides were cheating before the divorce, and the guy is pissed that his wife filed since they were both cheating. So they are doing the case, going to court and mediating who gets the house, cars, money and that BS, and the guy is a real about everything. Wife is too, my pops says, just a real ugly divorce. So it's getting to the boil point and the husband says to my dad and his client, I'm going to kill this, and right after I kill her I am going to come kill you, pointing at my dad. That same night he went to her house, shot her killing her, and was on his way to our house to I guess kill my dad when he got pulled over. Cop thought he was drunk, he was, arrested him for DUI, later he went to prison for murdering his wife. I thought that was the craziest one of his divorce stories. Story 39. I interned in a district court in North Carolina. I was rotating through courtrooms for the internship and jumped into this trial in the middle, so I was trying to figure out what was going on. The husband was black and the wife was white, both were very well dressed and articulate. This wasn't the usual case I see in court here, because the county is kind of trashy and rural. All of a sudden, the husband answers from the stand that the value of the marital home was $1,100,000. Hello, both sides were totally loaded, they were both corporate executives when they married each other. Anyways, the marriage fell apart after the wife discovered that the husband had had over 20 affairs. In the words of the wife, there were multiple traditional affairs as well as lots of payment to high-end prostitutes. Didn't get to stay and see how the trial ended, but I think it's fair to say that I saw the important part. Story 40. Not a divorce lawyer, but I worked for a guy who did this. A wealthy landowner lost his home to his ex, but not the entire undeveloped neighborhood land that he owned that surrounded it. He turned it industrial, and her huge house is now surrounded by factories.